My faith has been tested, my faith in God. And that leads me to this, is that I do a lot of public speaking, and I have what's called 7 inspirations from Luke. And those 7 inspirations are the core of what I talk about. Number 1 is to find your passion. I regained mine and talking about passion, never giving up, but your passion. Number 2 is don't ever quit. I never quit because that boy next to me never quit. And that applies to everybody every day, right?
Yep.
Don't ever quit. Third one is to lean on friends and family. I leaned on no one for a long time, but I have regained that. I need to have someone in my life because it's so important. And sometimes a simple text, how are you, goes a long way. I tell people, don't ever keep things inside. Find someone you trust. Fourth one is to make good choices, be careful. The fifth is to have faith. Without my faith in God, I could not do what I'm doing. It's tested, yes, but it's stronger than it ever has been. The sixth one is to find forgiveness. I finally did do that.
Yeah.
And the seventh one is to let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And those 7 inspirations, I believe, affect, whether you're 8 or 88, they affect you at some point in your life.
Tim Siegel, how are we doing today, buddy?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on. All the way from, it used to be all the way from Lubbock, but now it's over kind of on the east side of Dallas.
I think it's about 6 miles from here.
Unbelievable. How's it feel to be a Dallasite these days?
You know, when I first moved here, I thought I was moving for our nonprofit and for my job.
Yeah.
But I realized about a month in that I moved for me. And it's been tremendous. You know, I was the SMU coach for a couple of years in the early 90s. And so I know the area and just loved being here. It's been great for me.
That's good, buddy. I always start off and talk about a little bit about how we first met. And then I'd like to dig into kind of your upbringing, because I feel like that's important, you know, how it shapes people in life. But we first got to know each other really through this world of social media. Years ago, I saw, you know, and been kind of watching you post a lot online, and I reached out to you. I think I sent you an email, and like within 30 minutes you responded and you're like, hey man, here's my cell phone, call me anytime. Mm-hmm. And I picked up the phone and called you, and we probably talked for 30 minutes or an hour or such. And I was like, man, this guy's such a great dude.
So I misled you a little bit?
Yeah. No, not at all. And but that's where it started, probably 5-6 years ago, something around there.
Well, when you reached out to me, and I've during that time, I had a lot of people reaching out to me.
Yeah.
But you know, someone who's a former Texas Tech Red Raider, and someone who was interested in knowing our story, and then we got together shortly after in Lubbock, and the rest is history.
The rest is history, really is. Well, speaking of history, let's dive deep into that history. A couple years ago, let's go back to Southern Louisiana, right? I mean, were you born outside of New Orleans, or where were you born?
I was born in Manhasset, New York. My parents are from New York.
Okay.
And I was 2. We moved to New Orleans. My dad is a research consultant, did research in housing development, real estate, and taught a little bit at Tulane, and had his own his own company, and so grew up in New Orleans. And by the time I was 6-7 years old, I was focused on being the best tennis player I could be. And that was my life, really, from 7 till when I left New Orleans. So
your life for
played tennis all the time. And I just knew that's what I wanted to do in my life, was to be a professional.
How did you find the tennis racket? Like, how did that be?
My parents, we lived near maybe a couple of miles from maybe not even 2 miles from a tennis club.
Okay.
And so they played a little bit, you know, just club players. And then, you know, I took up the game early on and had some success. I think when I was 8, I was the number 1 10-year-old in the state.
Wow.
And then just played all over the state. And then by the time I was 12, I played national tournaments all over. Yeah. And so I was really dedicated. I worked hard at it and loved playing. And you know, I loved all the sports, but tennis, because of that early success, I'm like, I should keep doing this.
So who were your like tennis idols growing up? You know, I mean, who were guys that you were like gravitating to, like the icons at that time?
At the time, I don't know if I had. I followed the Connors and the McEnroes and the Borgs and Lendl and Vilas, guys like that. I followed. I don't know that I had one specific player that I really loved until I got on the tour, and then there are certain players that I admired. That Stefan Edberg was someone that I loved.
Yeah,
number one in the world, and then all of a sudden I'm playing against him. Yeah. When you walk into that locker room and you're actually, oh my gosh, there's John McEnroe. There's Lendl. There's guys that you looked up to, that are older than you. That I came towards the end of their career, and then I got to know the guys like Andre Agassi and some of the younger guys. But it was an amazing time for me to travel the world and play tennis. I felt like I got a second degree just from all the traveling. It was fantastic.
So you start playing tennis at 6 or 7. By the time you're 10, you're number one in the state. 10, right? Number one in the state. I mean, at that point in your life, are you like, I'm going to be a pro tennis player?
I knew when I was 12, it's funny that I even remember this. I can't remember things that happened yesterday, but I can remember that when I was 12, I was the 4th ranked junior in the country in 12 and unders, and one of the best doubles players in the country. And I knew that doubles was something that I could excel in because, at the time, everybody's focused on singles.
Yeah.
So from 12 all the way to 18, I really had my sight set on being a professional tennis player in doubles.
Okay.
And because it's a different game, the volleying and the movement and the strategy. And so, yes, early on, I said, I'm going to be a professional tennis player, and nothing was going to stop me. And I worked hard at it as a young kid. And then, obviously, when I went to the University of Arkansas, I continued that as well.
Who else recruited you out of New Orleans? But what were you recruiting on? What were your options on signing day?
Well, you had at the time, and still today, you have 5 official visits that you can take.
Yep.
So my choices were Clemson, Arkansas, TCU, Texas, and Trinity out of San Antonio, because back then Trinity was one of the top teams in the country.
Wow.
But I realized that that's probably not the right school for me because they didn't have all these major sports. So I only visited 4.
Yep.
So, and then it came down to Clemson and Arkansas. And I'll never forget, I wore Clemson orange the day that they played Nebraska in the Orange Bowl because I was going to Clemson. And this was January 1, whatever it was, at that year. And then maybe a month later decided, you know what? I'm going to go to Arkansas because I had a couple of former New Orleans buddy of mine, a couple of my close friends, and I fell in love with the campus and the school spirit. And so the fall of '82 became a Razorback.
Unbelievable. Now, growing up, did you play any other sports besides tennis? Were you all in on tennis?
I went to a private school, Lutheran private school. And so, you had flag football, you had baseball, and you had, basketball. I played all those, but I also knew that in order to really be the best tennis player, I got to focus.
Yeah.
Even though I would tell everyone to play all sports.
Sure.
Because of my success at an early age. And I still played those. But once I got to high school, it was 100% tennis and only tennis.
Yeah. So you go to Arkansas. Tell me about your time there, being a college tennis player.
The one thing about tennis is it's the only time in your life, high school tennis to some degree, but it's the only time in life where it's a team sport. And your whole life, your parents are telling you how great you are.
Yeah.
Not necessarily mine, but and then you have your coach who's the same thing. But what I loved about school at Arkansas is that not only was it a team sport, but I was coached hard, and I loved that. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And we had incredibly great teams. We were top 10 every year. We made the quarterfinals twice, Sweet 16 twice. We were one of the best teams in the country. And I was blessed to have played with some of the best tennis players in the world that were my teammates at Arkansas. They became professionals.
Yeah.
But I also loved the University of Arkansas to this day.
Yeah.
I look at those 4.5 years, as some of the best 4 years of my life because I was determined to be the best pro. So by playing good college tennis, but I also had a great time. I love the campus. I love the school spirit. I loved everything about Arkansas, and I do to this day. But it helped me. I got a degree in broadcast journalism because I always thought I'm going to be on the radio or TV.
Okay.
I did have my own radio show, KUAF, at Arkansas. I talked sports and gave my predictions. And I'm the biggest sports fan you've ever met.
No, I know you are.
In every sport.
Yes.
And so for me, it was sort of the springboard to this is what I'm going to do after pro tennis. I'm going to be on TV and radio.
When did you know in college that you had the ability to play pro? Or did you know going into college?
During college, I was playing, I guess you could compare it to, let's say, single A, double A baseball.
Okay.
I was playing minor league pro tennis at the time called satellites and things like that. So I was doing that, challengers. I had some success. So while I was in college, my ranking improved enough that when I graduated in December of 86, my first pro tournament was January of 87, 1 month later. And I'm playing a big pro tournament in New Zealand. And then I played the Australian Open in January of 87. So my ranking was already maybe 150 in the world in doubles so that I could my ranking was high enough to get into those major tournaments right off the bat.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you lived your dream.
I did. And what was interesting is that I followed
and not
tennis.
A lot of people get to do that.
That is true. And I think you could say my dream was both playing at Wimbledon and the US Open and all those major tournaments, but it was also for me to be able to say that I was in Africa, Australia, Asia, Europe.
Sure.
That in itself was really special. I was one of those guys that if I lost a match and I'm in Sydney, I'm going to go check out the Sydney Opera House. If I'm in Paris, I'm going to go to the Louvre. If I'm in Italy, I'm going to go see museums. I was a sightseeing guy as well as wanting to be the best tennis player that I could be. The other thing about tennis for me is I couldn't compete with John McEnroe or Ivan Lendl or Stefan Edberg in singles. But in doubles, I could. And I played all three of those guys. I had a win over Lendl in doubles. I had a win over Yannick Noah. I lost in 3 sets to Edberg, who was 1 in the world. But in singles, I would have no chance. But in doubles, I had a chance.
Yeah.
And so I knew my niche and played against some of the best players in the world, played all the best tournaments.
Did you play with the same partner most of those years, or did it change?
It's a great question because I made the 3rd round of the Australian Open in doubles. And I played with my doubles partner from Arkansas, Richard Schmidt, great player. And we made the 3rd round and we went to the beach to throw the football. And I throw the football to him and he's along the beach and he breaks his ankle. So that year, that was the beginning of the year, I played, I believe, 27 tournaments with 18 partners.
Oh my.
That's not a recipe for success.
No.
And so, I played for one of my biggest regrets as I'm 60 years old now. As you grow older, the regrets are less and less. But I regretted how short my pro career was. I knew I wanted to be a college tennis coach. Well, it takes sometimes players 2-3 years to get their feet wet on the tour. I only played just less than 3 years. If I had do it over again, I would have played for much longer. And maybe I'm instead of 100 in the world, I'm 50 or whatever in the world.
Right.
But I knew I played professional tennis. I loved it, but I had enough of the grind of working hard. And now it's time to be a college tennis coach. And that's what I did.
Wow. Where was the first college stop?
Right here in Dallas. I was the SMU tennis coach
head
women's tennis coach, and the assistant to Dennis Ralston, who's a legend, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, was the SMU coach. I played against him when I was at Arkansas. And so he called me up. I was the Indianapolis Sports Center tennis director. And he called me up and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I'll be there." And so I was the coach there for 2 years.
Wow.
And loved coaching. And I was, I think, better suited to be the men's coach, but it still gave me 2 good years of experience as a college coach.
Yeah.
Because I knew
at a great program, huge program.
Great program, great school. I just loved it. And I knew that my goal was not to just be the best tennis coach and have the best players, but to teach these players as much about life than just forehands and backhands. and to be a team, and to culture, and to work hard, and be on time, and to talk about family. And those were the special times. But after 2 years, I got a phone call about maybe becoming the men's tennis coach at Texas Tech, where I started in January of 1993. And I'll never forget telling my wife at the time.
Was Gerald Myers the AD then?
No, we had T. Jones was the AD. Okay. And I'll never forget interviewing Thanksgiving. And I told my wife, don't worry, I won't be in Lubbock. I just think the interview is important to go through the interview process. And, going from Dallas to Lubbock was basically almost going from one country to another. But I knew when I got there, I fell in love with the city. Yeah. I fell in love with the school. And I also felt like tennis at Texas Tech certainly could go up a level or two.
You could elevate it. Yeah.
And so I did. Started January of 1993 and coached for 23 years.
Unbelievable. What, so tell me about the early years, a bit like you come into a program like that, and I got to think Tech was not at the top of the Southwest Conference at that point, right? Were you practicing back in the bubble back in those days?
We had the bubble, yeah. And we were on 4 just almost rec courts.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you how tough the early days were. I started in 1993. We did not have our own facility until 2001. So the first 9 years of my 23 years, we were practicing and playing at the clubs in town. We had big matches held at Lubbock High School because we didn't have our own facility. We did not have much, but I worked hard at recruiting, and I worked hard at trying to sell me as much as the school, that I could help you get to the next level. And slowly but surely, we had some success, not tremendous success early. I think really when the program turned around were the early 2000s.
Yeah.
When we then from 2000, let's say 2003, 2004 until I left in 2015, we were consistently in the top 25. We had a couple of doubles teams made the finals of the NCAAs.
Yeah.
Made the Sweet 16. Had some great teams, great players, and by then, when you have your own facility, then you can say, okay, it's easy to recruit.
It's easier.
It wasn't always easy to recruit to Lubbock, certainly,
Sure.
for a couple of reasons. One, we never had an indoor facility.
Yeah.
And you need an indoor when you're in Lubbock for not so much the cold, but for the wind. Certainly. Yeah. That's one reason. And then just, Lubbock in general, if you wanted to go to a beach or the mountains,
That's right.
Wasn't a place for me. I tried to bring in blue collar type of kids.
Yeah. Kids
that loved going to class, going to school, getting a degree, and being the best version of themselves. And so I lost on a lot of kids for that. If you want to go where there was greener pastures, go right ahead.
Yeah.
But we're going to work hard. We're going to get better, and we did.
That's so awesome. What was probably the highlight of your, tell me a good coaching story.
I would say one that just stuck out immediately is that we were on the road, and we didn't have the budget that a lot of schools had. So we did a lot of traveling in vans.
Yeah.
So we drove to Austin.
Yep.
And we upset the University of Texas on the road. The very next day, there was usually a day off in between. There wasn't a day off this time. We drove to College Station and had one of our most incredible victories, beating A&M in the last match in the last set of the last match. And I was there with my wife and my, at the time, just a few months old daughter, Ellie, in 2005. And that was an incredible season because that was the season that we finished, I think, 12 in the country and made the Sweet 16. But those two, to beat A&M in Texas on the road.
Back to back.
Those were big. And then another one was, and of course, it's the University of Texas again. Texas, I believe, was ranked 3 in the nation. We're playing at home in front of over 1,000 people. And
that's impressive.
Yes, and beat them 7-6 in the third, last match on. And just my thing about coaching is that most people don't realize that in Lubbock, you are 3,000 feet above, right? So there's some altitude.
Yep.
And people don't realize that. So when you come in to play us, the ball's going to fly a little bit, going to carry a little bit.
Yep.
I wanted to make our home field advantage the best there was, home court advantage. I can do that with the altitude, but I could also do that with the crowd. And so I promoted as much as I could. We gave away
Yeah.
trips and rackets and pizzas and T-shirts. And we were the number 2 in the country my last year in attendance.
Wow.
We had over 1,000 for some of our big conference matches, but beating Texas at that time was very special to do that in front of that many people. And so, what I remember mostly though.
I mean, sometimes Luke Skywalker does take Darth Vader down, right?
I guess so. For me though, I remember the tough losses more so than I remember the great wins. That's a definite thing. Most coaches would tell you the same thing.
Yeah. When you look back on your coaching career, who was the most successful person in kind of helping you early on and throughout? Was there somebody influential that helped you?
I was one of those guys that I read a lot of autobiographies of coaches, whether it's John Wooden or, I remember even reading Rick Pitino's book early on. I read different books. And so there were some things I always took. And one of the things that I was told early on is I have to learn how to deal with wanting to win more than my players. I was very intense, very competitive.
Yeah.
And I thought, my players will want to win as much or more than I do. I had to understand that wasn't always the case. So that was something that I don't remember who wrote that or who told me about that, but that was important to me. Certainly my coach as a kid, Jan Buis, was my coach as a kid, did a great job with me. And I had when I was really young, Vince DiStefano in New Orleans, those two.
Yeah.
But college coaches, I learned a lot from Dennis Ralston on just the game itself.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I was different than most coaches and that it wasn't just about winning. Coaches will tell you that, but most coaches, it's about winning.
Yeah.
For me, it was really wanting to get these kids to understand the importance of family, the importance of being on time. That was a big one for me. It is today. I'm never late.
God, you hate me.
I don't like being late. I was early today.
Yes, you were.
I do not want to be late. But kids at 18, 19, 20, come on. Who cares if you're late?
Right.
It's important.
Yeah.
And also to work hard. I was a very tough coach. There were certain players that just didn't work with me because I was very demanding. In some ways, I was almost maybe suited to be a football or basketball coach.
Yeah.
Because I was tough. I was demanding.
Were you the Bob Knight of college tennis?
I think some would compare that. Yes.
Interesting.
I was. And because I believed that tennis players are generally soft.
Okay.
Because coaches, parents tell you how great you are.
Yeah.
I came in, I didn't tell you how great you were. I told you what you need to work on. I didn't tell you what you wanted to hear. I told you what I believed was the truth. And that didn't always work. Some players left. I got rid of some players because I was too tough. Yeah. But I also thought that I helped them. And I remember that I had Brazilians at the end of my college coaching career. My assistant coach, Marcelo Ferreira, did a great job, brought in some great players. But I was tough on those kids. And, I don't know how much they loved playing. They may have respected me. Well, I still keep in touch with all of them now. And so I think maybe I'm one of those coaches that you respect me more when you're not coaching that you're not playing for me, but it's after the fact.
Let me ask you this pointed question. Do you think because of the work ethic required today to be successful in tennis, do you think that that's why the U.S. kids are soft and a lot of the people now come from the Eastern Euros or Russia or whatever because they have maybe...
I think it comes down to there are more choices here. In Europe, there's two sports, basically. Two important sports, soccer and tennis.
Yeah.
Roger Federer walked down the streets here in Dallas. He would be recognized, but not by everybody.
Yeah.
A guy ranked 20 in the world wouldn't be recognized. In soccer or tennis, in Europe and other countries, you are. The best athletes tend to play other sports, unfortunately. And hopefully that's not, that's going to change. But, for tennis players in the U.S., you have opportunities to play different sports.
Yeah.
And I think work ethic certainly is maybe part of it. Certainly we have Americans that work extremely hard. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
People ask me, one thing, Conrad, that people ask me, are kids different today? And my answer to that is, I think it's the parents that are different.
Yeah.
More so than the kids.
Yeah.
Because I never enabled at the time I had 3 children, 4.
Yeah.
But my oldest daughter played high school tennis, was a very good tennis player.
Yeah.
A state semifinalist. My daughter Kate played volleyball and basketball, was all-state in volleyball. My daughter Ellie played volleyball and was a cheerleader. Luke played baseball and football.
Yeah.
Those kids knew. My kids knew you're going to play hard. And I'll never forget, Kate was playing basketball, AAU basketball, and she had committed a foul, and the coach tried to high-five her, and she kind of ignored him. I told the coach on that, out, she's done. She's not playing the rest of the game. And my kids knew, though, you're going to play hard. You can be respectful of coaches. And so I think it comes down to parents. And especially in the sport of tennis, like I said before, it's just easy to enable your kid because it's all about you.
Yeah.
And that's why team sports are so important. So important.
Yeah, for sure. And I asked that question because, I just felt like for a long time, you had Jimmy Connors and McEnroe and Sampras and Agassi and, Roddick and Michael Chang. There were so many great U.S. men's players, and it's just disappeared in the last 10 to 15 years. It feels like.
Well, I will say that on the men's side, you now have a core in the top 20 that we haven't had in a few years. Now, we haven't had a Grand Slam champion. Andy Roddick won, I believe, in 2003, was the last men's champion.
Unbelievable.
But with Tiafoe and Fritz,
I know there's
Paul,
some new, yep.
and so Fritz makes the finals of the U.S. Open. We're going to break through.
Yeah,
we're going to break through. One of the reasons we're going to break through is Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic.
are going to retire pretty soon.
Two have retired, and Djokovic has maybe a year or 2 left. So I do think you're going to see that breakthrough. But I think men's tennis, American tennis, is probably stronger than it's been in years.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear because it just seemed like, you obviously had this massive run by Serena on the women's side, who's obviously dominated, but it just seems like kind of since Agassi and Sampras, it's just been this slow, it's kind of gone into oblivion.
I think it's easy to feel that way if you don't have a Grand Slam champion.
Yeah.
But when you talk about Shelton, Tiafoe, Fritz, Paul, I know I'm missing someone, but they're there.
Yeah.
And I think they push each other now. Who's going to be the top American? Yeah. And I do think you'll see a breakthrough for sure.
That's great. So we teach at Texas Tech for 23 years, right? We retire. Let's talk about the next chapter in your life.
I had thoughts of resigning so I could spend more time with my kids because at the time, Kate was 12, Ellie was 10, and Luke was 9, and I just didn't want to miss out on their sports because I'm such a sports guy, and I could see that my kids have not just the talent, athleticism, but the desire.
Yep.
And so I made the decision on July 8th of 2015 to resign when my team, the year that I left, won the Big 12 in the top 10. I wanted to leave the team in good hands, but I just wanted to be around my kids.
Yeah.
So I resigned to spend more time with my kids, and I took a job that most college coaches don't leave from college coaching to middle school and high school, but that's what I did. So I became the high school and middle school coach where my kids were going to school, which I would do until my son Luke would graduate from high school.
Yeah.
And so on July 8th, I resigned. 20 days later, I'm at the high school. And I got a phone call that no father ever wants to receive, that my son Luke, who was 9, was in a golf cart accident. And I asked him on the other line, how bad is it? He said, I think he broke his nose. I got to the scene and I realized it was much, much worse. The ambulance had just taken off. The helicopter was hovering above.
So you didn't see Luke at that moment when you got there?
I did not see him.
Yeah.
I got to the hospital 10 minutes later, and a gentleman took me into a room with my wife, and he said, the golf cart that Luke was on landed on top of his chest, and he suffered head and chest trauma. and he was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. A far cry from just a broken nose. And what I remember at that time was all of a sudden my hands, my face were tingling. I couldn't feel anything. And next thing I knew, I had an oxygen mask in my face. And I remember a nurse telling me, be strong for your son. That's about all I remembered. And my wife is a nurse practitioner. The great thing about that is she knew a lot. The bad thing about that is she knew a lot. So all I had to do was look at her when we received news, one way or the other. The first 8 days were touch and go. We had 3 major brain surgeries on day 7. And
so was he having bleeding and stuff?
He had a major brain bleed, multiple fractures. But because he had head and chest trauma, we were dealing with lung issue as well as brain issue. And they didn't really mesh well with each other when you're dealing with meds or taking care of one and not the other. And so when we had 3 surgeries all within hours, it was about 1 a.m, doctor comes into the room and says, there's nothing else I can do for your son, but it's in God's hands. And when they hooked Luke back up, the brain pressures dropped. And I remember I also dropped on the floor because thank God that they dropped. They were hovering above 20, 25, 30, which is, you want to be below that because the brain pressure was so severe. And so day 8, I didn't know if Luke was brain dead. No one told us. No one knew. And it wasn't until that day when a doctor asked me if Luke loved music. And I said, next to sports, music is his favorite passion. He began to play the ukulele. And at that time, there was brain activity in the monitor.
Wow.
And I remember running outside the hospital just on cloud 9 that there was something there. I was naive, though, thinking that Luke was going to get that many levels of better. But I also knew that if there was one command that he could respond to, I'll take care of the rest. And so we were in Lubbock for 44 days, multiple surgeries later, and we were transferred to Cook Children's Hospital on September 10th of 2015. And 5 days after we were transferred, we were in a room with therapists, nurses, social workers, and the last person to speak was the neurologist. And he held up an iPad, and he said, this is Luke's brain. It was white. And he said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but based on Luke's MRI, he'll never use his limbs, use his voice, and should never open his eyes. Now, everyone's leaving the room. I'm in there with my wife, consoling her. Can't believe what I heard, but I said to him, hold on, before you leave, have you ever seen an MRI, a globally damaged brain, this bad, but that child made some progress? He said, yes. I said, that's all I need to know because you don't know him and you don't know me. So that was September 15th. A couple of months later, we were told we may not be able to stay much longer because he wasn't making any progress. The Friday before Thanksgiving, Luke made his first sound. Everybody on the 4th floor of Cook Children's was running to it was like a miracle. Like right. Luke is making a sound, and he was off the ventilator, and he was just making some progress, breathing on his own. And so I said, okay, here we go. And but wasn't doing enough to warrant staying. And so on January 6th of 2016, 5 months after the accident, we were sent home. And I was concerned, are you giving up on my son? But that wasn't the case. It was, we were going to make more progress at home. And I was told that, and it really was the truth. And so here we are now about to start a new life with my 3 daughters, my wife, and a child that, an athlete that he was nonverbal, was G-tube fed, was, no longer on a trach.
Yeah.
But, okay, how's this going to work? And I remember being that person that I became Luke's primary caregiver.
Yeah.
And I went to every therapy session with Luke. I did everything with Luke because I was convinced Luke was going to get better.
Yeah. I mean, Luke did improve, right? I mean, would you say at the end of the day he got...
Oh, I think in the 6 years that I was his primary caregiver, Luke made tremendous progress. Now, some would say very little, but I saw it. It started out, I'm from New Orleans, so I'm the biggest Saints fan in the world, and Luke became this biggest Saints fan.
Yeah.
And so I remember, I'll never forget this. It was a year after the accident, and the Saints were about to play Denver. And I'd always asked Luke blink if, but I didn't know if that was Luke blinking or not. And I said, Luke, we're playing the Broncos today. Move your tongue if you think we're going to win. Moved his tongue. I'm like, oh my God. I can't believe what I just saw. So he understood.
Yeah.
And so that tongue movement became kind of the staple of, I would ask him a question. Luke, do you want to listen to Bruce Springsteen, Dad's favorite music? He didn't move his tongue. You want to listen to Ed Sheeran? He moved his tongue. Do you want to move from the bed to the chair? He would move his tongue. But the time that it took him to do that was less and less.
Right.
So he was quicker.
Yeah.
And then it was, Luke, can I hear your voice? He would open his mouth. Maybe a sound would come out, maybe not. And then eventually, Luke, I love you.
Yep.
And he would say, So I was convinced that Luke was going to speak. I was 100% sure. All my dreams were the same.
Yeah.
In the kitchen, with his sister, and he's speaking.
Yeah.
So I knew he was going to speak. And but one thing we also knew is that COVID was out there.
Yeah.
That COVID for a child with compromised lungs was dangerous. And middle of August of 2021, Luke got COVID. But we came home and I saw no real symptoms, no signs of COVID. But he was needing more breathing treatments. And then on August 18th, I didn't like what I saw. I took Luke to the ER with the nurse, and they didn't put him in ICU. They put him in a room. His oxygen level was fluctuating, but okay. And I went home that night. My wife stayed with him. And 4:30 in the morning on August 19th, I got a knock on my bedroom door, get to ICU. About a mile into my drive to the hospital, I'm at a red light. I heard a voice. You're going to be okay, but Luke's not going to make it. And I fought that until I got to the hospital. And as I walked into ICU, the first person to greet me was the doctor. And she said, Tim, I don't know if your son's going to make it. And I said, I know. A few hours later, at 8:39 in the morning on August 19th, Luke passed away. And I was, I don't know if anyone listening today who's had this happen to them, devastated is too soft a word. I was beyond devastated. I don't know that I ever grieved Luke, this ambiguous grief of a child who isn't the same. I was so busy taking care of Luke to make sure Luke got better that where I failed a little bit was I wasn't enough there for my daughters and my wife, and my daughters, they were never asked, how are you? It's always how Luke was doing. But when Luke passed away, I remember my wife at some point later said to me, I'm relieved that Luke passed because his injury was more devastating than his passing. And I understood where she was coming from, but not for me, not at all for me. And so it took me a long time to get over it. And I'm not over it.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to get where I am today. And what really changed my life was, Luke's favorite number is 3. Everybody that follows our story knows that 3 is our favorite number, Luke's favorite number. And the football coach at Texas Tech, Coach McGuire, doesn't give out the number anymore. A coach, the hardest worker and the greatest fighter in honor of Luke. But on July 3rd of 2023, so a little over a year ago, I called a father, and he found his son in the bottom of the pool. But because he's a first responder, he saved his son's life.
Yep.
But because that happened, it brought back everything for me. And so I struggled so much. And I felt almost this out-of-body experience because I just had such a hard time. And I remember later that month, I did a book signing and written a couple of books. And this second book came out and did this book signing. And I went to a church service. And the pastor talked about bitterness, anger, and the need to forgive.
Yep.
You ever been to a church service where you know that he's talking about you? Well, that was me. And I went to speak to him after church, bought his book on forgiveness. And a buddy of mine said, hey, I can get you to come visit me, but I've got a friend who has a lake house, but you can't come till Thursday. Well, Thursday was August 3rd. And on August 3rd, I forgave the family and I forgave the hospital. And the most freeing thing in the world, how many times I was asked or told you can't heal until you forgive.
Yep.
I was able to do that on that day. So here I am now, a year and a few months later, I have forgiven. And it's allowed me to be a better father, a better executive director of a nonprofit. Better person.
You know,
Yes.
I mean, I've seen it myself, you know, and I'm so happy that you forgave.
Yeah.
You know, you had to get that off of your shoulders.
8 long years to carry that was tough.
It was tough.
My wife was married to a bitter, angry person.
Yeah.
And I love Jenny dearly, but it tore a marriage apart.
Yeah.
And my girls and so much. And, you know, it was tough. But one of the things that has saved me
Yep.
is being in Dallas now, but also it's January of 2018. I became the executive director of Team Luke Hope for Minds.
Tell me about, like, how did you decide to kind of start like, how did you go, I want to do this?
Well, I was at therapy with Luke in 2017.
Okay.
I just put him in the van and I'm sitting in the parking lot and he had just thrown up. And I was just distraught about how he was doing. I looked back in the rearview mirror and there he is. And I had a friend call me and said, hey, you know what you should do? You should start a nonprofit. I'm like, I don't have the time or energy. I have no time for that.
Yeah.
Well, so January of 17, I started the Team Luke Hope for Minds Foundation.
Yep.
I didn't have a clue what I was doing,
Right.
but I knew what I wanted to do. I had a board and did all these things. But about 5 or 6 months later, I got a phone call from a woman named Rhonda Johnson, who had a nonprofit called Hope for Minds in Austin. And she called me and I said to myself, Rhonda, I'm coming to Austin. So the next day I drove to Austin, had breakfast with her, and I was going to do everything that she was doing and then some and take it back to Lubbock.
Yeah.
Halfway through the meeting, I called time out. I said, let's merge. Let's do this together. And so January of 18, we formed the Team Luke Hope for Minds nonprofit.
It's amazing.
And we support children all over the country. We're in 47 states. We have granted over $500,000 each of the last 4 years to families in need. Conrad, the one thing that I can tell you is that no one could ever imagine the amount of children who have suffered brain injuries. Every 9 seconds, there's a brain injury among children.
Wow.
Non-fatal drownings, car accidents,
Yep.
accidents like my son. We
Yep.
see them every day. We get applications almost every single day. And my job as the executive director is to raise awareness, to raise money, and to get in front of people.
Yep.
And, you know, I know this, that I'm keeping Luke's legacy alive by helping families. And I have a tremendous staff. We have a grant writer, a social worker, a director of ops, a communications person, a fundraising person, my partner, Rhonda Johnson, who's director of family services.
Incredible board.
Incredible board. Conrad is one of our 14 board members.
No, it's been an honor to
Yeah.
be involved. I mean, just what you guys do and the families that we're helping is it's so impactful. And you just, speaking of that, you just got back from the big event down in Austin this past weekend, right?
We had our annual Making Connections Pediatric Brain Injury Conference, 8th annual. And I don't know that I have the words to describe how impactful it was for the families and for me. But for the families, we had 160 families. We scholarshiped 77 families to come. We had families drive from California, Las Vegas, Phoenix. 24 states were represented. And this conference, it's a conference and resource fair. So you have the vendors and you have keynote speakers, whether it's stem cell, laser therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, a number of speakers. But it was about making connections with other families. They felt like it was a safe place and a place where people got it. Because who could really understand what you're going through unless you've been in their shoes? And here you have 160 families that all experiencing the same things. And we also did something very special for siblings. And we had dance parties and karaoke and arts and crafts. I did a lot for them as well because, let's face it, most of the time, siblings take the back seat to their brother or sister who's had a brain injury.
Right.
And so it was a special couple of days. We're also in the process of something that I think is going to be a game changer for Team Luke. We're in the process of filming a documentary, a 1-hour documentary that will come out in early 2025.
Yeah.
That will talk a lot about what I've shared with you today. And I think it's going to be very important because, there are a lot of important people that Luke inspired over the years through our social media, through my page, Luke's Legacy on Facebook, Team Luke for Minds. But there are a couple people that meant a lot to Luke. Drew Brees, of course, being one of them. Drew has done events with us and raised money and is so important. He was Luke's hero.
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes, who's never played a game for the Chiefs without wearing on his right wrist the Team Luke for Minds bracelet.
Yep.
The tennis world, Andy Roddick, Andre Agassi, John Isner, just to name a few. So we had a lot of famous people that have supported our mission.
Yeah.
And I'm just so blessed and grateful for them.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how you start this journey of the nonprofit and you have no idea what you're getting into. But then when you look up how many people's lives that you've impacted, and that's what life is really all about,
right,
is how many lives you touch in a positive manner. And when I look back at Luke and his legacy for me is just, being a fighter, right? And just never giving up and those were things that I needed in my life at that time, and that's why I gravitated to reach out to you, and then now, I mean, I've worn those same 2 bracelets every day since you gave me the first one, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was. And so, I think about Luke daily because I look down on my wrist, and I probably tell the Team Luke story, once a week to somebody,
right. It is amazing the impact that he has had all around the country, whether you're wearing a Team Luke for Minds t-shirt, sweatshirt, hat, bracelet. When Mahomes is holding up the trophy, Super Bowl trophy, and you see Team Luke, the impact that he had on Elvis Andrews, former Texas Ranger baseball player, Luke's hero.
Yeah.
I could just go on, and it's just, it's heartwarming. But, one thing I can say is that my mission in life now is to help families each and every day. Until I take my last breath, I will be involved with Team Luke for Minds.
Yeah.
And when a parent comes up to me and says, I feel Luke's presence, or what you are doing to give hope to our family, because it's really about that, isn't it?
Yep.
It's giving hope to families to feel like there is hope, that the brain can heal, the brain can reconnect. Every brain injury is different.
Yeah. There's no playbook.
There's no blueprint. Even the best neurologist and neurosurgeon can only predict based on an MRI.
Yep.
Because I feel like the most important therapy Luke ever received was the love he received from me, because I was there every day talking to him.
Yeah.
and not talking about him, but talking to him.
Sure.
And I know Luke was in there. He understood.
Yeah.
You know, when I was the commentator when the Saints were playing, or I was the commentator when Elvis Andrews was up. Hey, Luke, Drew's about to throw a pass. Those were things that Luke understood. I know he did.
Yeah.
And I never tell a parent what your child can do or what he should do or what they should do for therapy, just on what we did.
Yeah.
But there's nothing better than when a parent calls me and says, thank you for reaching out to me.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your story. Because we help families financially, also through education, support services.
Yep.
We have support groups online, free counseling for siblings and parents. And then, like I said, our Super Bowl, which is our conference. It's been rewarding. Listen, it's heartbreaking too.
Sure.
But I'll tell you this, that I can move forward because I've released the anger and the bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a tremendous amount of sadness every single day. There are triggers, whether it's songs, sports, or whatever it is.
Right.
But I also know that Luke's right here.
Yeah.
He's in my heart. And as difficult as it is, it's been over 3 years. It still feels like sometimes 3 days, 3 months.
Yeah.
But his legacy will live on forever.
Well, we know this. He's looking down on you and he's smiling at Dad because, dude, you've done a phenomenal job of creating this incredible organization, and Luke continues to just touch so many people, and that's the best thing to come out of all of this, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, and one thing that happened to me, I was driving around aimlessly 1 year after the accident. And I had my head down near this grocery store, which I never wanted to go to because it was near the accident. And I had my head down, and all of a sudden, I was startled to a knock on the windshield. Hey, I'm praying for you, 1 foot in front of the other. And then he walked away. Didn't tell me his name. And so 1 foot in front of the other is certainly a motto of mine.
Yeah.
I used to take 1 foot in front of the other and maybe take 2 steps back. But I'm working hard on that.
Yeah.
And the other one was, I was at a basketball game and I was outside with Luke and I was standing up and Luke was in his wheelchair. And I've never had someone walk right past us without at least acknowledging us. Hey, can I pray for you? What happened to your son? Or a sympathetic hello. This woman walked right past me with her head down. 5 feet, she turns and she says, you were chosen for this.
No, that one is so
and walked
powerful.
away and didn't tell me her name. And maybe I was. And you asked me about the nonprofit, but I couldn't do what I'm doing without my faith.
For sure.
My faith has been tested, my faith in God. And that leads me to this, is that I do a lot of public speaking. And I have what's called 7 inspirations from Luke.
Yep.
And those 7 inspirations are the core of what I talk about, whether it's to a team, I'm talking to a team tomorrow, whether it's a business or whether it's just school kids. Number 1 is to find your passion. I regained mine and talking about passion, never giving up your passion. Number 2 is don't ever quit. I never quit because that boy next to me never quit.
Right.
And that applies to everybody every day, right?
Yep.
Don't ever quit.
Amen.
Third one is to lean on friends and family. I leaned on no one for a long time, but I have regained that I need to have someone in my life because it's so important. And sometimes a simple text, how are you, goes a long way.
Yep.
I tell people, don't ever keep things inside. Find someone you trust. At the same time, when you see someone who's struggling, hey, you doing okay? It goes a long way. The 4th one is to make good choices, be careful. It goes without saying, doesn't it? Make good choices, be careful.
Yep.
The 5th is to have faith. Without my faith in God, I could not do what I'm doing. It's tested, yes.
Sure.
But it's stronger than it ever has been. The sixth one is to find forgiveness. I finally did do that.
Yeah.
And the 7th one is to let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And those 7 inspirations, I believe, affect, whether you're 8 or 88, they affect you at some point in your life.
Yeah. Tim, how can you find out more about Team Luke?
We have a website, teamlukehopeforminds.org. That it covers A to Z on what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have my own page, Luke's Legacy, Pray for Luke.
Yep.
Also, I wrote, my second book is called Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith. It's now on audio too. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I narrated this. It's on audio as well. People can make a difference by hearing this today and sharing it on your social media, sharing it with your friends, because you never know one of two things. Someone you might know who had a brain injury, and number two, hey, maybe this person would want to support the nonprofit, because we do need to raise money consistently to be able to help families.
I mean, the biggest challenge for us now is you've done such a great job elevating the brand of Team Luke. Now every children's hospital in America knows about you, right? And they get so many, and every time there's a kid who has a brain injury, we're the first person they call.
And it's only going to get
more
bigger and bigger, and word of mouth, but we want to be able to help every single family.
Sure.
Whether it's through education or financial support. But
and you have a couple big events every year. You usually have a big event out in Lubbock, where you get the big basketball arena, and you'll have big bands and stuff like that show up. And you and I are working on something that hopefully we're going to have here in Dallas next year, which we think is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes.
What I like to do is I love to close with what I call the C-suite closers. Okay. These are quick hitting questions that just lets the audience know a little bit more about you. Okay. What's something that most people don't know about you, Tim? Is there anything that
don't know about me? I am funny about dates. I remember certain dates.
You do.
I'm a numbers guy about dates.
You're like Rain Man.
I'm definitely not Rain Man, because Rain Man's smart. I don't know but I can remember certain dates, whether it's a sporting event, something that happened in my life, and certainly that's the case since Luke's accident. But yes, I think that's probably one that people don't know about me.
What's the most impactful book that you've ever read?
That I've ever read? Well, the most recent book that I read was my own.
Okay.
I don't know if that was the most impactful. I would say the Bible.
Sure.
And I've been reading more than I have in the past.
Interesting.
And actually, Jesus Always, which is devotionals.
Yep.
And that's been impactful for me.
Good.
That I would say for sure right now, absolutely.
What is on the Spotify playlist, your top 3 bands? Like, what are you listening to? So
I'm a huge music guy.
Okay.
I've seen Springsteen and U2 a total of 32 times, 16
Have
each.
you really?
I just saw ELO in concert. I'm a huge Eagles, ELO, the Lumineers.
Are you going to go see the Eagles at the Sphere, or have you already done
It's definitely a possibility. I would say it's probable. I did see U2 at the Sphere, but I'm a huge music guy.
U2 is so great.
It was that concert was amazing. I saw U2 in Dallas, which was fantastic. Another a great one. But Springsteen is probably my big go-to music. I believe in some ways Springsteen has saved my life, because all the drives back and forth.
What's the top 1 or 2 Springsteen songs you're going with?
My favorite would be Badlands.
Okay.
All-time favorite song. And then one that is the most impactful now on his most recent album is called I'll See You in My Dreams. That last album was all about those that are no longer here, the impact that he's made. And whenever I hear that song, of course, I think of my son.
Yeah. If you could have coffee with one historical or famous figure, who would you choose?
Well, first, it wouldn't be coffee, because I've never had a cup in my life.
Never?
Never one cup of coffee in my life.
That's unbelievable.
Historical figure.
It doesn't have, just anybody.
Honestly, can I have 3?
Yeah,
one
sure.
would be a musician, Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
It has to be Drew Brees, because of...
But you've already met Drew Brees.
I've met Drew Brees, but I haven't had coffee with him.
Okay.
Because I would want to be able to talk to him and tell him how much he meant to us.
Yeah. Okay.
So we got Springsteen, we've got Drew Brees, and then, I guess you could say a John Wooden type of, someone like that because of the coach.
Yeah.
Because it's coaching about life as much as it is about sports.
Let's talk about that real quick because I think this would be fascinating. And I'm shocked I didn't think about this earlier. But you were there coaching at the same time Bob Knight was there. Tell me about Bob Knight.
I loved watching his practices. He was so tough, but he taught them so much. And, I remember I would go into his office and just want to talk basketball. And it was a different side of him there, right? So he knew about our tennis team. He cared about our team. He was someone that followed sports religiously. And he came out to watch us play Army in the first round of the NCAAs, where of course he coached.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, my favorite Coach Knight story is I took my tennis team to one of his practices. Now, I told my team, you do not speak, you do not smile. You sit there and you watch practice because you've got to focus.
Yeah.
So we're watching practice and coach is going crazy on his team. He's mad. And he comes over to me and he says to the team, tennis players could throw the ball better than my basketball players. Now, my guys didn't know, can they laugh here? Is it okay to laugh at this? Because he was that way.
Sure.
But I respected him as a coach for sure. I didn't know him that well.
Yeah.
But what I did know is he taught these guys a lot more than just basketball. He taught them about life as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. If you could live anywhere else in the world besides, now you're living in the greatest place, Dallas, Texas. Not really. Greatest place for business, I should say. It's not the prettiest place in the world. But where would it be and why? If you could live anywhere else?
Believe it or not, it would be Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Okay.
Because I sort of have a reconnection with Fayetteville. Being in Dallas has been great. I'm 5 hours from Lubbock and I'm 5 hours from Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just a beautiful place. To me, Fayetteville, Arkansas is one of the best kept secrets in America. It's beautiful. It's growing. It's a great university, but just the area, I just love it.
Yeah.
And I could see myself retiring there one day.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I love where I am because of the sports here in Dallas.
Yeah, there's so much to do here. Have you found your favorite restaurant here in Dallas? Or anything that you've...
I don't know if I have a favorite restaurant. I just know that I'm trying to go to as many as I can. That's for sure.
All right, let's go back to Lubbock because you spent so long there. What are your go-tos in Lubbock for, casual? Where did you like to go? You were there forever.
It's funny because I like, it's not really it's not a Lubbock thing, but walk-ons. I supported walk-ons because Drew Brees was a part owner. I'd go to walk-ons a lot. There were some Mexican restaurants that I loved. Picosso's, supporting anybody that supported Luke and Team Luke.
Yeah.
So I have restaurants that
still,
whether it's Blue Sky or Picosso's or Stella's, those are restaurants that are all about Team Luke and Luke. Yeah. And if you're darn right, I'm going to go to those restaurants when I go back in town.
Where do you take it? Where did you take the recruits to dinner when they came into town and you were trying?
Well, one of the great restaurants, of course, is Las Brisas.
Yeah.
And certainly that's where we would go.
Yeah.
It's funny about recruits because sometimes in the past people would tell you, don't bring the players in during the day because they're going to just see this flat land. Mm-hmm. So you bring them in at night. But I'll tell you, Lubbock is one heck of a great place. And it's a great college town. Listen, Texas Tech athletics.
Yeah.
We're talking football and basketball and baseball and track.
Yeah. National champs.
Soccer. I can go on and on. Volleyball, women's basketball. It's men's golf. I'm still very much involved with Tech athletics.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very close with all the coaches. And I want to see Texas Tech and the University of Arkansas successful.
Yeah. No, people don't realize, I tell people all the time, when you go and you look at Tech's campus, it has some of the most beautiful architecture in the country. It is beautiful from a building perspective, you know. But yes, it's obviously very flat out there. I don't know why they didn't build it like down in Post, right? Like, why did Lubbock, right? Because like if you go 50 miles down,
right,
you're in this amazing canyon with trees and hills and the Palo Duro Canyon runs through there. But I think the best thing about Lubbock, and you know this, is just the people of Lubbock and West Texas are incredible. Salt of the earth people.
From day one, before I took the job, hey, you're going to love Lubbock because of the people. And there's no better people in the world than West Texans.
There really
isn't. And that's why now I go back to Lubbock and it's the people that I love. And, you know, my daughters are still there now and my grandchildren. But I think for me now in my life is I needed a fresh start. Yeah. I needed a change.
For sure.
And I needed to reach new people. But I will be visiting Fayetteville and I'll be visiting Lubbock all the time.
It's so easy.
Yeah.
Love Field can get you both places in an hour.
Exactly.
You know. Well, buddy, thanks so much for taking the time to come on today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and love having you on the board and love talking sports with you and music as well.
Well, we will definitely do it again sometime. And folks, check out teamlukehopeforminds.org when you get a chance. And hopefully we'll be seeing you at a big event in Dallas sometime next year.
Thanks, Conrad.